Our first guest today, our next guest today, is an attorney. We're going to talk a little bit about civil rights. Let's welcome Kevin G. Little. Welcome, Kevin.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Good to see you
again. Coming again. You're kind of going to be a regular around here, I think.
That'd be great.
Now, civil rights attorney. Should we start with what are civil rights?
Yeah, civil rights. Yeah, we can talk about what are civil rights because, you know, it's a term that really means the Constitution. The Constitution is a paper document unless it's enforced, and civil rights attorneys such as myself are the ones who actually help enforce the Constitution by bringing cases on behalf of citizens who feel like their constitutional rights have been violated.
So it's constitutional issues.
That's right, exactly.
And is that like the 10 amendments and?
That's right, the Bill of Rights, mostly.
The Bill of Rights.
You know, there are other amendments, 26, I believe, but you don't often see civil rights cases about any of them other than the first 10.
Well, I've got a question I wanted to ask somebody, a constitutional scholar or somebody, and since you deal in this, I'll ask, and you can bill me for it too, because I know attorneys charge for it.
All right. Okay.
Are non-U.S. citizens, do they have civil rights under our Constitution?
Absolutely they do. They have constitutional rights under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Those rights are different from, in some contexts, than those of citizens, but nonetheless, immigrants, including undocumented persons, do have civil rights.
So the Bush administration, I think, was capturing terrorists and not bringing them into our country. And I thought maybe that's the reason they did that, is they didn't want them to have constitutional rights.
That certainly was part of it.
Okay.
Yes.
And now we're seeing a lot. I didn't get to hear the president's entire speech last night, but there's a lot of issues with immigration going on.
Sure. Yeah. Some people would even say that we have a war on immigrants going on right now. Unfortunately, we hope that we don't have divide and conquer strategies in politics, but perhaps that's what's going on these days. But yeah, immigrants, there are lots of policies and laws being enforced against immigrants. And it remains to be seen the constitutional challenges that'll come up through the courts challenging some of the policies.
Now, through our history, we've had some issues where immigrants maybe were mistreated. Certainly in World War II, the Japanese,
absolutely,
they're Americans.
The internment camps. That's right. That's right. There was a great Supreme Court case. It was actually considered one of the worst decisions ever issued by the Supreme Court, the Korematsu versus United States decision, where the Supreme Court found that those internment camps where the Japanese Americans were being held in these internment camps, that was constitutional. The Supreme Court, there are 9 smart people. Well, right now 8, but they don't always get it right.
Now, do you remember if that was unanimous?
I don't believe it was unanimous. I believe it was actually a 5-4 decision in favor of the government.
And I wonder if it's ever been overturned. They don't overturn Supreme Court decisions very often, I would imagine.
They don't overturn Supreme Court decisions very often, but there have been other decisions that place Korematsu in great doubt as valid law.
Certainly. Yeah. Now, and Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus.
That's right, during the Civil War. Yeah. That's right. And habeas corpus is the right of people who are in custody to challenge on constitutional grounds the conditions of their custody or just merely the fact that they're in custody. And that was suspended during the Civil War.
Now, back to the immigration, I guess immigration laws are mostly federal laws.
Most immigration, actually all immigration laws are federal. That's an area of the law where the federal government has exclusive jurisdiction over dictating what goes on with immigration.
And who enforces federal laws? Not the locals, or do the locals?
Well, the locals help enforce the laws. You might have heard something about these so-called sanctuary cities, where the laws immigration laws are enforced differently or less strictly than they are in other parts of the country. But both the federal and the local police agencies enforce the immigration laws to different extents.
Yeah, to different extents. And I was confused. I don't follow the news that closely as I used to, and it was important that I do. And I'm just picking up bits and pieces. So
right. Well, the main agency that enforces the immigration laws, you have the Border Patrol, who is, actually at the borders, patrolling the borders, and then you have Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, better known as ICE, which has a really cool sounding acronym, but it used to be called INS years ago.
Right. Oh, that's right. Okay, I got it.
But they also are a federal agency that enforces the immigration laws.
So they're saying 11 million people have snuck into the country.
Yep.
And I guess they're trying to decide what to do now. So would this be the type of client that would hire you?
Well, it depends on the circumstances, but sure, if their civil rights were violated and they would want to challenge those, then sure. And that's something that is certainly being done by constitutional lawyers at this point in time across the country, challenging some of the policies of the current presidential administration.
Now, somebody was joking to me the other day that if they were an illegal immigrant who snuck in from Mexico and they got picked up, that they'd just say, well, I'm from Canada, and they'd kick them out the north end of the country. I don't know.
Well, I think they've got a little bit more resources to check and confirm where people are from, but it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem that we're going to be wrestling with for the next 4 years, it sounds like.
Yeah. I have never had a job where I had to prove that I was a citizen, but I guess almost everybody now that's hired has to give some sort of proof.
That's right. That's right.
I don't know how I'd prove it.
Well, you'd prove that you have the ability to work legally in the country because you have a Social
Security number. There you go.
That's the basic way that you would prove that you're legally here in the U.S. and are entitled to work. You've got your Social.
Now, if non-citizen, I guess they call me illegal or whatever they are. I think about this a lot. If I was born on the other side of the border in Mexico,
right,
I'd do everything I could to get to this side of the border. So,
well, there's lots of economic imperatives why undocumented persons come to the United States, and the bad apples always get the most publicity, but most of the undocumented persons who come to the United States are hardworking people who are looking just to make a better life for themselves and their families.
Well, there's 11 million. We must all know a few undocumented people.
Of course.
So
of course.
We wouldn't even guess, maybe. So now, if somebody's been here for 20 years, 30 years, and they've had kids and raised a family, and they get picked up by these new ICE or whatever, would they call someone like you? Or are they just gone? Are they just thrown out?
Most likely they'd call an immigration attorney who knows the immigration laws back and forth and really knows how to assert their rights, because the immigration process is not unconstitutional to deport someone as long as you abide by the process. Yeah. So they would really need somebody who knows that process.
Specializes in that. Right. So
they'd get an immigration attorney more likely than a civil rights attorney.
Now, when I hear the word civil rights, I think back to the 60s and the marches and the protests and stuff like that. But what's modern day things are happening that somebody would need a civil rights attorney?
Well, a lot of civil rights attorneys, including myself, focus a lot on police misconduct. And that is a big problem. Lately, we've seen that in the news all over the country, issues of police misconduct. And probably 2/3 of the civil rights cases I handle deal with issues of police misconduct, whether it be someone who is alleging that they were unlawfully beaten by the police or shot by the police, or someone who's saying that they were arrested for no good reason.
Well, things have changed a lot, I guess, now that everything can be documented on the cell phone.
That's right, the cell phone, and also here in Fresno, at least, all of the officers now have the body cams. So there is a lot more video and media evidence of what goes on out in the field than there used to be. Now,
has it been decided who owns that video?
I believe it's pretty well settled that the agency owns the video. It used to be, before the equipment became standard issue, you had certain officers who had their own body cameras. And at that point in time, they owned the footage.
They owned it.
But the departments used to require them to preserve it for a certain amount of time and make it accessible if it ever became an issue in a case that they were working on.
And now, if the agency owns it, it has to be part of the public record, I would imagine.
That is correct.
The
correct.
media could ask and demand to see it, I would have.
That's right. And there is something in California called the Public Records Act. It's kind of like the Freedom of Information Act on the local level. And you can request body camera footage. You can request traffic camera footage. You can request those things. Now, whether you get it is another story. There's lots of exceptions that sometimes municipalities and public entities rely on to withhold that stuff.
Yeah. Well, you may have to call Kevin Little if you want to get access to that stuff.
That's right. Call me.
Yeah.
I do lots of public records requests. That's kind of one part of the nuts and bolts of being a civil rights lawyer, always getting the public records.
And so the public doesn't always release them easily?
No, there are lots of exceptions. If it pertains, for instance, to an ongoing investigation, law enforcement or a public entity doesn't have to disclose the records. If it is otherwise privileged, like for instance, if it's a public entity conferring with an attorney, they don't have to necessarily turn that over, at least until that case is over.
Okay.
So there are lots of exceptions, but the key is always to request it, and because
get your request
you only have the entity only has 10 days to say yes or no, and if they don't respond in time, then you're entitled to it, whether there's an exception or not.
Bypasses the exception.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Now we saw, I don't want to put you on the spot, we saw a case the other day where an off-duty police officer is grabbing and holding a kid, and he accidentally discharged his weapon. I don't know if you saw that video.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, so
it was very unfortunate.
Yeah, and it almost looked like an accident, but I don't know. But that one, somebody's probably going to get a civil rights attorney and ask. Yeah,
I would suspect that would end up being a civil rights case and also a negligence case. Whether you're undercover, off duty, or if you're acting as a police officer, you can be sued in your job capacity as a police officer.
Well, we want to have you back every few weeks or as often as you come. I could sit and talk like this all day. They're signaling us it's time to go. Anything else you need to touch on or want to today? I want to ask you, get contact information and stuff out there.
Sure, yeah. My phone number, which hopefully is on the screen, is area code 559-342-5800.
Okay.
And I'm located downtown in Fresno. We're on Divisadero, 1225 East Divisadero, right there on Divisadero and Poplar.
Yeah, just a little bit east of Van Ness.
That's right.
Now, should somebody always make an appointment, or can they just drop in?
You can drop in.
Okay.
Yeah, you can drop in. You may not get to see me, but there are two other attorneys that work with me in the office, and hopefully one of us can accommodate you.
Now, let's say somebody has something happen and they don't feel comfortable about it. Maybe they're pulled over by the police and something happened that they felt should be addressed. How long do they have to go see you or take some action?
Well, you have 6 months to file a claim if you feel like a public entity or a law enforcement officer has violated your rights. And if you don't file that claim within 6 months, then all of your state law rights go away.
Okay.
And you have 2 years to sue under federal law.
And are most of them in state court?
Well,
I mean,
it's a mix. Some are in state court, some are in federal. It just depends on the type of case and the agency involved.
But I would imagine they should go see you right away.
That's right.
Because the evidence starts drifting away, witnesses forget, and
that's right.
Maybe, I don't know if they keep traffic cam footage forever or not, but...
yeah, one of the local judges here often said cases are not like wine. They don't get better with age.
They only get worse.
That's right.
All right, it's Kevin Little. You can call Kevin. It's the law offices of Kevin Little.
That's right.
Several people there. You can call them at 342, is it 5800?
That's right.
342-5800. Just drop in Divisadero and Poplar. If you can't find him or you can't find the number or you forget, call me. I'll give you his direct number because I've got it. I'm standing by for my case. We'll be back with more Mike and Athena right after this.